Also,
All right. Good evening, everybody. I think we'll just open the floor for someone to give us gratitude this evening. I'm looking at Wise there. I'm going to put you on the spot there, brother. If you could give us gratitude, if you would be so kind.
What a spot. But hey, fortunately, I always run away from the negative side of things. So yeah, amidst everything that's happening, one is still really appreciative of the opportunities that we have to utilize the work days, if one can actually say so. It may not be to the full scale that one wants it to be, but yeah, one is fortunate to still have the so-called working days, you know, and having these restrictions being relaxed timelessly, though they may be argued in terms of how beneficial they are to the entire population, but then, you know, we hope for the better.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wise. To echo your sentiments, I mean, we just continue to be grateful for good health. That's number one. And number two, grateful that we continue to be able to participate in the marketplace, in the economy, given all that is going on in the world and in the economy itself. Right. Welcome everybody to this rather chilly Thursday night. Well, for those of us anyway who find themselves logging into this call from the southern tip of the African continent. As you may or may not know, my name is Tabani and I've been tasked with facilitating the discussion this evening, daunting as it is. Tonight, Amber will be delivering the message of the day, which will consist of, but hopefully not limited to, history and the future. Should we be forgetting, remembering, or both? A subject every leader in the world is having to grapple with. From the superpowers to the developing economies, the entire globe shares in the burden of having to navigate these testy waters. We here in South Africa have had and continue to have our own grapplings with the subject. Thinking here about the Rhodes Must Fall movement of 2015, and going back into into history that brought about the change in the new dispensation. Whether you're for, against, or heaven help us, indifferent, one thing is for sure, you'll be affected by whatever the resultant reality brings today. Amber, you have 15 minutes to put this feast together for us. Thereafter, the floor will open, and we'll all have an opportunity to rummage whatever we can by way of contributing, reflection. And with that, Amber, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hey guys, how's it going? It's kind of strange, but nice to be talking here. So Vincent asked me to kind of bring something to the table. I had a bit of a think, trying to think about all these things I'm passionate about. But at the moment, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world, which I kind of thought might be a good place to start, see if we can pull apart some of it. I don't know. We had a kind of a similar discussion, I guess, last week. So there's a kind of a theme maybe emerging, but I mean, I see a different kind of vein in this topic in particular. I've seen, so basically the last couple of weeks, there have been this sort of Black Lives Matter protests. And as a kind of a continuation on from that, there's been this focus, this kind of attention turned to historical statues, street names. There's been bars and restaurant names being called in there as well. And the kind of the campaign and the request has been, we need to remove anything or change it or update it, anything that's got a kind of a connection with somebody who had a link in their past to slavery or racism, which is a kind of a big thing. And the more I saw about this, the more I saw a lot on social media. A lot of people have got their opinions, and that's where they put them. But I saw some stuff in the news, I did some different reading, and I just had all of these questions, and it really got me thinking. And I think I sort of did some trying to put all this together so I could bring it to you guys. And I think I did a count at one point, and I had some like 30 questions. So I don't know if I'm going to ask you them all today, but we'll see how we go. And I don't know if I think sometimes in the past I feel like, am I like the devil's advocate, or am I just clueless? I'm not really sure, but yeah, certainly inquisitive at this point. So I kind of was going to start at I guess the beginning of this particular bit, this thing that's happening at the moment. And in the UK, it seemed to kind of come to a sort of dramatic sort of start back at the weekend of the 6th and 7th of June. And the first statue in the UK was of a man named Edward Colston down in Bristol. And there was kind of, the call for this statue to be removed. And in the end, campaigners actually took it upon themselves and removed the statue themselves, and they actually threw it in the river, I believe. So looking at Edward Colston and who he was this English merchant, philanthropist, which is why I guess his statue is in place, or was in place. But he was also a member, and then went on to be the deputy governor of the Royal African Company, which at the time was a company that held the monopoly in England over the trade of slaves, essentially. So that latter reason is obviously why the attention has turned to being, looking at his statue being sort of removed. The more I sort of looked into this, the more that you see a lot of these statues particularly have been erected and put in place for reasons of philanthropy. So I started kind of looking into that a little bit. And if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, their sort of definition is one sentence. And the first part of that sort of says, a person who seeks to promote the welfare of others, which seems fairly, to me, contradictory to this person's involvement in the company that was trading slaves, essentially. But there is a second part to that sentence, and the second part says, especially by the generous donation of money to good causes. So there becomes this question here about, is the money, Edward Colston in particular apparently had donated, it's thought, £70,000 to charitable causes. So you can see somebody who's done some good there, but the questions are beginning to raise in my head about the good that he did. Was it enough? Was it enough to outweigh the bad? All of this money that was donated to good causes at the time, was there a question about where that money came from? If the money comes from a bad place, does that still justify the good act? I don't know. So there's already this thing in my head that thinks good and bad, and how do we decide which one is the outweighing factor? If somebody has done something good, is it enough to kind of forget the bad things they've done? Does it depend? Does it depend on the weight of both? How do we decide, etc.? And then, sort of following on from this, there was then so Liverpool University, their halls of residence held the name of a gentleman, or man I should say, called William Gladstone, and he is somebody, they've chosen to remove that name now, but he is somebody in the past who basically had a kind of a change. So he started out, he was a Liberal politician, he was the only person to be the UK Prime Minister 4 times, but he spoke out against the abolition of slavery, and he also called for compensation for slave owners when the practice was actually outlawed. It seems to be because that, well, it makes sense that his dad owned plantations in the Caribbean which used slave trade, so I think that was his kind of connection to that. But then it said that he, later on in his career, had completely changed his point of view. Reportedly had kind of, his whole attitude had completely changed, and he at that point regarded, so from the early stage of his career, kind of, you know, standing up for all these terrible things, later on in his career he regarded slavery as the foulest crime in the UK. So then you have an interesting situation with somebody whose attitude changed completely. And then my questions there are, you know, if somebody manages to kind of change or grow or learn or develop as a person, you know, can we forgive? Can we forget? You know, again, does it come down to how bad the things were? You know, if you spent 50 years being a pretty terrible person, and then the last 5 years of your life you turn it around, can we forgive all of that? I don't know. Yeah, kind of a lot there. I'm just taking it all in as I'm speaking as well. I guess there's also quite often, you know, in modern day, there's celebrities in the media, and quite often there's something brought up from their past in Twitter or some other thing, and they said something you know, however many years ago, and then all of a sudden the attention is brought on that thing. And I guess the question is always about, you know, when did they say the thing? Was it acceptable at the time? Is that good enough a reason now? You know, can we forgive people, or is it merely the idea that instead of you being celebrated, you get forgiveness and that's enough? You know, you don't get a statue, you don't get a great big sort of following. You get forgiven for the things that you did wrong, and then we move on. I don't know. Yeah, just literally, I'm just going to throw questions at you guys, and then we'll see if you guys have got the answers later. That's my tactic here. So I think I was also just kind of thinking about, where do we go next? There's been a big campaign in the UK. Every day I see a new petition online, something else to sign, something else to look at in every city. The government in the UK have been, they've kind of issued a statement, and they are not looking to remove anything. As it stands, the sort of the cultural secretary, he outlined in a 3-page letter that, you know, for him, heritage should be used to educate people about all aspects of Britain's kind of history, whether that's morally complex or whatever else. And for him, the idea of removing these statues and changing street names and things would be sort of airbrushing history, as opposed to learning from it and having it there. He also added that a lot of the statues that are in question are listed, so they can't be removed without a kind of a planning permission or a bit of a process. And in terms of street names, that's something that can't be changed in the UK without 2/3 of the street consenting to that change. So there's kind of like a democratic process there. And I guess the question on that is who lives in that street? What are the motivators? You know, do they want to change, etc., etc. So I guess taking all of this stuff that's happening at the moment, it's heavily rooted in the past and the way that we're feeling about it all in the present, but looking in the future, for me the questions are, well, what do we want to achieve? Do we want to forget the terrible things that have happened? Do we want to remember them? Do we want to do a bit of both? Is that the more useful way to go about this? I guess kind of at the root of it all, the idea of a statue, and the thing that's causing people a lot of frustration at the moment is that goes some way to sort of celebrating somebody, and that should be sort of removed maybe. But is this really all more about changing the narrative? You know, there are lots of arguments to say that instead of just getting rid of a landmark as such, it should be placed in a museum with a plaque to explain why it was removed from its original location and how that kind of change came about. And there's also been a lot of sort of calls to recently, maybe less so much attention on this, but there's been a lot of talk about some TV shows that should be removed because they've maybe got some sort of offensive sort of content or something that's seen as controversial, or and again, a lot of people are kind of saying, well, this was acceptable at the time, and these are things that I've grown up with, or these are things from my own past, and then there becomes this kind of sentimental and emotional attachment there. But again, is the argument that these things were acceptable at the time good enough? You know, should they ever have been? Should we ever have accepted those things? And I guess for me, with all of this, there's I get either way, whether it's a TV show, a statue, a street name, there's a considerable amount of work to be done. But, and I think that's both physical and mentally, I don't think that means that we shouldn't undertake the work. I think that if, you know, we are going to grow and we're going to progress anyway, there's going to be work involved in that, and I think that's a good thing. But then there's also some consideration, I feel, for maybe the people who created and wrote and made, you know, as part of all of these things, people who made the statues, people who created the TV shows, and if we need to consider the respect for their work. I was once told that we should stop buying artwork from artists who are already famous because they've already had their time, and we should instead put money and buy into artists who are just starting out, who need the support. And I don't know if there's also something in that, you know, is it time to take away all of the old and create some space for the new? And then the other question that kind of came to my mind was, well, you know, if we go about this process of editing and changing, we can do all of that for the moment now, for what's appropriate and what's relevant in the cultural climate that we have now. But do we need to consider that at some point in the future there'll be more change? Do we get better at the way that we do these things? Do we, you know, instead of naming streets and things after people, we look at the IKEA approach, and instead we name things after nature. You know, if people are always going to have a bit of good and bad in them, let's stop stop naming stuff after them. I don't know, but then I don't know if by doing that and trying to preempt that in the future we're going to have to change again, that we remove this whole conversation. We remove all the questions, all the conclusions, and all of the answers that we have to find. Yeah, so that's probably my roughly 30 questions that have been thrown at you guys, and we'll see how we go. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for that, Amber, and well within your 15 minutes, so thank you for that. I don't have to play some elevator music, playing you off stage, as it were. Yeah, quite a deep submission over which to reflect and contribute and think over. I see there's you know, already a whole host of comments and questions being fired off in the group chat. So I think, without, you know, not wasting any time, I think we should just open it to the floor. Charlene, would you like to expand further on your contribution on the chat? Hello, Charlene. Okay.
She's gone to get a beer. I'm joking.
The important things, huh?
All right. You know, I think let's just open it up to the floor then. Would anybody love to make a contribution or question or reflection?
Me.
Mbali or Julie recognized?
Amber, I don't know if you're aware, but I had seen it on one of our news channels, but it was like a banner on the program that there's protesters in the UK that want the statue of Mandela removed, but I don't have context as to why. Well, not that I care, but I don't, you know, I just found it very interesting.
I don't think, to be honest, do you know, I didn't look at this one entirely. There's at the moment there are so many. It's a really strange thing. As soon as you look in, but I did recall actually seeing something about Mandela as well, but I didn't. To be completely honest, I didn't read into it. I'm just gonna have a quick look actually. Nothing comes up. So most stuff is actually positive, interesting. I can't find anything on that. That's really interesting. I do feel like I saw that. Sorry, I'm not really answering your question. I just wondered if I could find something on it quickly. But no, unfortunately. Not so far. Sorry.
No worries. It was just interesting because
Yeah, for sure.
all the statues coming down and all.
But what do you think would be the motive behind wanting to have the statue of a person like Nelson Mandela, removed during the whole removal of statues and dismantling of monuments?
Geez. Okay, so I have my own narrative about Mandela. That's a story for another day. But maybe the people have the same narrative as me. Probably, and also because we live in an international world, I wouldn't know whether they are South Africans or just locals. But if they are South Africans, I would assume that they just see him as a sellout. Simple. If they're internationals, I don't know. They probably just say, why isn't he not in South Africa?
Okay, that's interesting.
So I'm looking here just to see if I can find anything. Most of the pages that I try and go to have like an error 404. I don't know what that's about. But there's one headline that says there's a petition to remove the statue of Nelson Mandela in recognition of his terrorist activities and murders. So that's the apparent reason.
So those terrorist activities are they seen in context? Does it say of
No.
whatever the history there is?
No, there's nothing. There's nothing that gives me any kind of further context on that. There's just a headline, and every time I try and go further on, it says we can't find the page. So whether there's something in that or not, I don't know.
Hi, I have a question for you. So where I work, in Johannesburg, I work in Sandton. And in Sandton, there is a place called Sandton City, which is linked to Nelson Mandela Square. And there's a big statue there of Nelson Mandela. So that serves as a tourist attraction. I suppose it has intrinsic value. There is a generation of tourist attraction. There's businesses that are centered around that statue. So I would say that sites depend on it to some degree. So the statues that you are talking about, would you say the same thing about those statues, where they're situated? Are there businesses that are situated around them? Do they generate any revenue for those businesses? Are people interested in those statues?
It's a tricky one, because again, I look at kind of both sides, and I reckon the argument can be made either way. At the moment, there's a statue in Edinburgh, which is the city I live in, and there's a few street names centered around a man called Henry Dundas, and he has the same links. But there's a very prominent, big, very large statue, which is of him, and there's a call to remove that. Now, here it's difficult because that statue itself is located in a square, and so the area itself is kind of called St Andrew's Square. So the businesses around there, I don't know that would cause an issue in terms of location. But you know, that's not to say that there aren't people who really value that statue and have different reasons. So I think it's hard, and I think this is why it's such a, I have so many questions about all of this, because you know, the work that goes into removing something like that, you like you say, all these businesses are kind of centered around this. This is a focal point, and this is a place to kind of recognize a landmark, which is obviously understandably why people are a little bit like, oh, you know, we take this away, there's a big kind of impact here. So I think it's probably a case-by-case basis. Here in the UK, it's all different. There's all, you know, people from the whole past. You know, it's not, and in some cases they probably are in definitive locations. In some cases, it's probably a tourist thing. So I think each one almost serves a different purpose. Would be my take on it, if that makes sense.
Can I pose a question into my group of friends here? Just as I'm listening, you know, I mean, of course, can I go on? Sorry, Tavani.
Yes, please proceed. My silence was consent.
Okay, yeah, I'll remember that next time. Anyway, so my question is, you know, I always try and zoom away from the noise, to try and get, you know, to try and get, my apologies. I'm going to shut the group chat. Charlene is on my case as usual.
As she should.
So I'm asking a question to us. The reason why I'm saying I want to disassociate myself from the noise, the clutter, and the emotion around, you know, the subject that's topical at that moment, and really, you know, ask myself, what is my genuine resonance to what's going on, and I look for points, you know, that would connect me to the subject. But anyway, on the subject of statues, and this is just a question, you know, for everyone, that is it, who goes anywhere looking at a statue and saying, I get a sense of XYZ by looking at this statue. This statue reminds me of XYZ. This thing is about that, you know. So who goes around looking at statues and describing their attachment to it, using whatever emotions that they may be feeling at the time? Do we even have, I mean, I know for a fact that in Durban, for instance, where I grew up, there were statues all over the place. I don't, not even a single time that I've ever stopped and asked myself, this is the statue of Queen Victoria. I mean, all these people looked weird anyway. I thought it was just art growing up until I was old enough to know that these are actually figures that actually lived at that time. So for me, it's a question of, you know, do I look at a statue and as a common man, as a layman, find resonance with it that will then cause me so much emotion that I then start, you know, thinking about, oh, well, perhaps, you know, I should just remove it then because it makes me feel like this all the time. Is it really about that? Or is it about, you know, just us jumping on the bandwagon because obviously, you know, that is what is happening at the moment. So I'm asking the question in general. I'm probably removed, you know, from the subject because I'm certainly struggling to connect. But is there anyone in the group who would say the statue of this guy reminds me of XYZ and therefore I would like it removed? In fact, all of my 100,000 friends would like it removed as well because you all feel the same about it.
Well,
I share your sentiments, Vincent. Sorry, I'm just echoing what Vincent says. I also share the same sentiments.
that is to say, you're indifferent to, or rather, don't share in the enthusiasm of, statues and monuments and their existence.
Yeah, I think it's also because all these people were like before my time. And like I say, I have reservations about Mandela, so his statue also just doesn't please me or make me excited. But generally, like I don't see the use.
Oh, that's, I think one of the points that continues to amuse me by holding some sort of a cognitive disconnect is Germany has outlawed all displays of communist and Nazi symbols. Outlawed, it's against the law. Finish and clap. But you continue to have teachings of the past, of the country's history in textbooks and in museums. And I was in London watching a Arsenal game a couple of years ago, and I saw the statue of Thierry Henry, and that just brought me back great memories of watching, him playing for Arsenal and all the moments that that are attached to the man and his contribution to the soccer team, which I love, unfortunately. And I'm just wondering, it got me thinking about the psychology, around what invoked those feelings. When a person sees, for example, in America, the statue of Robert E. Lee, who was a Confederate soldier, a Confederate general. This is the same general who led an army against the Union. So I'm not sure what to think of, a person who sees a statue and reveres it. So I'm thinking, Vincent, to your point, it's purely that it invokes some sort of emotion, seeing the statue of a person that you hold in whatever regard, whether it be the negative light or positive light, or you're just indifferent, or just marveling at the architecture of, the masterpiece that is the statue.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tavani. But I mean, I don't know why people are deciding to type today and not talk. But Nadia, Nadia, you're saying what statue you want to take down with pleasure? Is it the ones that I'm saying I can't find resonance with? I mean, what are you talking about? Sorry, I thought you were answering me.
What I'm saying is that I'm also a bit. I don't know yet what I think of statues in general, of people. But in the Netherlands, you have a lot of statues of what is called the VOC period here in the Netherlands. So that's like the golden period after the Middle Ages, where we were raiding the world and were into slavery. And there are a lot of those sort of heroes, named. Street names are named after them, or buildings or statues. And I think with the world we're living in now, maybe at the time we were just very narrow-minded, but at the time we're living in now, things should change, and you should not give these people a statue, but you should make the history also more inclusive if you want to go forward. And it really irritates me that these statues are still there. Also with regards to, like, there are of course also a lot of female heroes. They are not there. They are not in a statue, or too little. And that's what's annoying me. So it's of course not about the statue itself, but the story it's representing, and the honor it's giving to a person. And now we know what that does to society. So let's break it down.
To me, comes with a very alternative view, and it's quite interesting. It says, I don't care about the statues until they were built, until they built them incorrectly in Durban. And as a public, we got to know how much they cost. So I do not think, so I think they're a waste of money.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a typo there.
Okay.
I meant to say that now that I know how much they cost, I just think they are just a waste of taxpayers' money.
Yeah, I kind of figured that.
Yay, my watch is back on.
But why though? I mean, if it's not a waste of taxpayers' money to, build roads, to facilitate the movement of people, goods, and services, why would it be such a waste of money to erect, monuments and in memoriam, statues and such to remind us of a past, or to remind us to, continue to have a connection to a past?
For me, I think the focus shifts from why the statue is being built to just erecting the thing and not educating the people about it. I'm a teacher, and in a primary school, in one of those schools in South Africa, and it just breaks my heart when there's a topic about Nelson Mandela, and I learn that the learners have absolutely no clue as to who this guy is. They know the name and they know that he was born somewhere in July, but they don't know anything after that. So that has shown me that the education that we have, and especially the information that we feel that it's valuable and it needs to be preserved, and if you imagine how many statues of Nelson Mandela are there in South Africa, and to know that there are teenagers in the same South Africa that know nothing about Nelson Mandela and the struggle that the South African people went through for the freedom, then it just makes no sense as to why do we erect those things if they're just there for show. That's why I'm saying that it's a waste of money.
So that money would be better purposed, restructuring the education system.
I don't think that it's only the responsibility of the teacher to teach, to pass down the such information, but it's the responsibility of all the South African citizens, the parents, the neighbors, the gogos, and everyone who has the information. But the information needs to be passed down for the people who are coming from different backgrounds, who did not have the access to the information at the time, so that they can have it. Like, maybe I'm speaking like this because I do know about South African history, and I only got to know the real role Solomon Mahlangu played when a movie came out, and I went and saw that movie. And after that, when the name Solomon Mahlangu was mentioned, a hell lot of emotions God run through me because of the movie. If it wasn't for that movie, then I wouldn't have gotten to know about him. I don't know if the movie depicted him correctly or accurately, but what I got from the movie is enough to evoke a hell lot of emotions in me when his name is mentioned alone. So when after watching the movie, I had the knowledge before the movie, I would feel differently. I'm not saying that I don't like the way I feel, but I'm trying to highlight the point of passing down the information that we feel should be preserved. because it doesn't help if it's the older generation that have all the details if they're not going to pass it down to the younger people. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Can I just come in and
Yes,
add my
please.
2 cents worth? Okay, so in South Africa, I think it's the Northwest. There's a place called Maropeng. I don't know if anyone has had an opportunity to go there. So basically, that place has several, maybe if I'm not mistaken, probably around 50 statues of what I would consider African heroes. So people that date back as far as Bushman time, if that's the politically correct term to use. If it's not, I do apologize for offending anyone. So for me, when I went there, it was such an exciting feeling for me to understand an African history that I'd never been exposed to, because unfortunately, African history is not well documented. So when it comes to African heroes, I know of Shaka Zulu, I know of King Mshweshwe, and the Mandelas and the struggle heroes. But Africa has, or South Africa at the very least, has a wealth of heroes. So there's been so much that Africans have done that has not been documented. And had it not been for that little, probably 800-meter piece of land, I would have not known a key part of what I consider to be my history and my heritage. So for me, Vincent was saying that he doesn't understand the whole hype around statues. I'm interested in that kind of history. And I felt a lot of pride when I got to understand that, wow, I come from a heritage of strong leaders. Although they're not in my, Africans specifically have not been celebrated for their heroism, rather for being slaves and somehow even sellouts. So for me, I point. But there are, on the other side, on the other hand of my arguments, there are other statues, like, for example, in South Africa, again, I'll speak of South Africa because that's where I'm from. So I understand a lot more of South Africa than any other country. There are certain statues that when I see, I believe we shouldn't be honoring these people. So I typed out a comment earlier on saying that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. She spoke about the guy who was involved in slave trade. Probably to his little community, he did a lot with what he did with the money that he was able to make and the effect that he had in his community. But to the mother whose child was sold to slavery and who never got it's quite subjective. But I think when it comes to morals and ethics, there's no one size fits all. So we will, just as in this chat, in this video conference, we won't all agree when it comes to morals and agreed set of ethics around the world that, you know, if you're involved in slave trade, obviously that's not right, whether you are a beneficiary or whether you are oppressed by it. So it just depends on which side of the coin you sit on. Unfortunately, ethics are not black and white. There's a thick gray line that ethics are measured on, and it doesn't make it clear, excuse me, especially when you have to answer the question, should we celebrate them? I definitely wouldn't forgive and forget. But if I was a beneficiary, I'd celebrate them because now I have something that I wouldn't have had it not been for those specific individuals. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks for that, Tando.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I've been quiet for some time. Obviously, I've just been soaking in what everyone has been saying. I'll just have 3 parts, and then I'll leave you guys to actually carry on. So the first part is I'm not sure who was commenting just now, but just to address how you went specific number of, to me, in my mindset, take all the statues, and that the statues are there, reminded of this person who oppressed me. Imagine waking up every day, seeing someone who abused you as a child every day in your house. You probably want to kill that person, you know what I mean? So same thing is the statues are a constant reminder, constant visual reminder to language and all that stuff. But if it's streaming services, because you came here on your own will, they don't censor that stuff. Do you know what I mean? So same thing with the statues. Don't make me watch this thing that should be censored in my eyes, but you're kind of enforcing it on me. Let me go to a specific place where I'm like, I'm okay. I know it's not going to be censored. I've more emotionally prepared myself to see it and go through these emotions. So I'd like the statues and all these monuments to be moved into a museum or a place that is secluded where people can go there. It's still celebrated in whatever shape or form, but you elect to go into that place. That's my first part. Second part to this is we're trying to look towards the future, obviously, with this whole group of ourselves. I don't know how, but I'd like to detach the good deeds from the men, which is very hard because obviously, I guess the part of the story is who did that, under what circumstances and all that stuff. It kind of builds this, but I'd rather like to put the highlight more on the deed more than the person. So if you went and liberated the people, how about you put statues of people that were liberated and not the person who liberated them? Just makes sense. Every time someone walking here is like, oh, that's my great-great-grandfather. He was liberated by so and so and so. That's a statue of my great-great-grandfather who actually didn't even do anything, but he benefited from being liberated or something like that. So I feel like, again, we're in a very technological generation on such old methods of visualization and all these statues is very premature. It's nice, it's art, but I feel like the public shouldn't be like, there's other media, you can send emails. I mean, people do a lot of this via the technologies that we have. There's news, there's movies, there's news ads, there's all those things that you can actually do for us to just depend on a ads and all that stuff. It would be much easier, I think, in my idea. I say, okay, one, just to sum it up, let us still celebrate the good, but because now every person who did this and you've attached this good deed to this person, everyone is infallible. Everyone will have some sort of something that will tarnish it. Let's try and diminish or not highlight the person as per se, but more the good deed that he did. So when you read a little snippet under the statue of the people who were liberated, his name is mentioned there, but not in high bold letters, but it just says this person did this. And when you want to, you can go read up on that person. You understand, we need to understand as a community, people will have a good side and a bad side. People would have gone and changed. And in terms of whether should we erase history, I absolutely don't believe that we should, because as soon as you do that, the history will repeat itself and we will not be ready for it, none whatsoever. And people would have not taken any accountability of what happened. We would have been none the wiser, the new generations, to be prepared for that attack or those events to happen again. So removing it from history is totally out of the box for me, because it is an evolution of what we are. I mean, if we remove that history of the human beings and what they did that was wrong, where do we stop? I don't believe in the dinosaur theory, but do we also remove that they were dinosaurs and they got extinct? Where do we stop as far back we go? So that's my 2 cents.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Martin. With 3 minutes to go, does anybody want to leave us with a parting shot?
Yeah, if I may, you know, for perhaps the first time after a long time, just for following the subject on the background of the recent weeks. I mean, there is that prevailing question of saying, is this really about statues? And I'm not sure if it is about statues, but that's another, subject. But you know, just to hone in into what Martin was saying earlier on, is that, you know, perhaps we are stuck in the crises of trying to move forward and also trying to preserve what we think is necessary for us to value. The issue of statues might have been really, you know, the only means by which people can be reminded of heroes, or whatever the case is, whatever the intention was initially when these things came out. And I mean, I think this will go all the way back to the Roman days, I would believe, or probably even the Egyptian days. Who knows, you know? But I mean, we're in 2020. And perhaps instead of having to be trashing things and creating riots and demanding stuff, how about we challenge what exists and offer a proposition of something that actually is practical, sustainable, and can bring cohesion and some sense of progress in the society in which we live in? Because obviously having to tarnish statues and it's all done in violent sort of acts, and it doesn't really look beautiful from a person who's a peace lover like myself, to say, oh no, why are you guys doing this suddenly? So, but instead of having to do that, rather let's go and sit and think about how do we best improve what we have inherited, and create something out of it, which tomorrow we can look at and say, we changed the course of how commemorations are being done. We've changed the course of how heroes are being admired, and so on and so forth. Because honestly, being in 2020, I do believe that all solutions which we bring forth to the table should represent us as humankind in a far better light than what we are being presented at the moment, because we actually look quite violent, we look quite angry, and I'm not sure if it's something that we'd like to sustain as a narrative of having to sum a group of people that are protesting outside to doing something. I think really we should apply our cerebral capacity, challenge ourselves into saying, let's improve what we have, as opposed to tarnishing it. I have the same theory about people that, you know, say, oh no, capitalism is not, you know, the way to go, blah, blah, blah. I said, if you hate capitalism, don't want to destruct capitalism because it's working for others, rather come with a new economic system or economic means of trading that would topple, and if you make a compelling argument on whatever that you think will topple capitalism, then you will get a following. But to sit back and say, oh no, let's destruct all of this, but then what? And nobody has a clue. So in connecting to the future regarding the issue of the historical value of statues and so on, I think the question should be, especially amongst us with all the technologies that we have, we should then start thinking about how best do we preserve this without having to appear as utter hooligans.
Passionate. I couldn't agree more. The room for conversation has to be expanded far much wider than violence. You know, but I think, you know, violence is a reaction, is a visceral reaction in the most part, and you know, seeing these monuments of these people and events that, you know, are revered or held in some sort of favor has people reacting that way, you know, in a violent manner, because simply having a dialogue, be discordant, seems to not be yielding, you know, favorable results. I'm not advocating for violence, by the way. I'm merely trying to pathologize it. So yeah, I'm fully in agreement. Amber, do you have any closing words on the matter?
Just thanks, guys. It's been good. There's a lot of a lot of questions I had. Like I said at the beginning, sometimes I probably am to a fault of trying to, I say I have one argument and then I go, oh, but what about that? And then I go, oh, what about that? So it's good to bring it to a room full of, we're all in a room together all of a sudden, but a room full of intelligent and positive people, and just hear some of the stuff you guys are thinking too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Certainly, thank you for the subject. I think, you know, the hour has gone. We've just hit 2 minutes over. I think, you know, Vincent, you can stop the recording now. And if, you know, people are free to stay on the call and discuss it at their leisure. But I think for the most part, this has been a very fruitful and, you know, filling conversation. And thank you, Amber, for the well put together discussion.